Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The Public Works Committee will come to order. Thank you all for coming this evening and for bearing with us as we allowed the preceding committee to finish its business with a little extra time.
We thank you.
You're very welcome. We have on this evening's agenda for general agenda items plus 7 consent agenda items. Are there any of the consent agenda items which need to be removed for discussion?
C6.
C6. Anything else?
If there's nothing else, I move approval of the balance.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Discussion? If not, those in favor of approving the consent agenda other than C6, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no? That's unanimous, and we will go then to item C6, please.
Item C6, update on firm selection for comprehensive bicycle master plan.
Thank you very much. Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, Mr. Turner, if you could, or have a staff member give us an update on where we are with the project.
Mr. Chairman, we would, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, what we would be doing is briefing the committee this month on the procedure, actually on the consultants that were considered for this study. And you can see who we are recommending as the consultant that received the most number of points in our ranking system. What we would do is then bring this back to the committee and to the finance committee actually for consideration of a contract award next month. So where we are is asking for your, well, briefing you this month and then asking you next month for approval of a contract with the preferred consultant.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Members of the committee, council members, I have talked to a number of you, including staff, about this particular proposal. I think staff has done a great job of going out, taking a look at businesses who could be considered for this contract. I'm not necessarily satisfied with the way the contract has sort of turned out. I stand sort of divided in support of Davenport because he is a local business. He's a local MWBE business, and I know this council has sort of set a precedent that it wants to sort of build capacity for these types of businesses in our community. There are a number of businesses who have offices here who are not necessarily local businesses who end up getting contracts. We all know the pros and the cons of doing that. I think it falls on a pro to support a local business who hires local people, who makes a local difference in our community. Those dollars stay in our community. And I think there is criteria that sort of prohibits Davenport from taking the lead on this, and I'm fine with that. But I think we should allow him, as a local firm, to sort of build capacity. In the RFP, we have the authority as a city and as a council to make that decision. Here it says candidate firms may be asked to present their proposal to city staff before the final selection is made. The Winston-Salem City Council and North Carolina NCDOT Transportation Planning Branch and the city also plans to select one firm, and we have the authority to add, subtract, or do whatever we need to do to make a proper decision. I think the proper decision is capacity building. So I'm concerned about this particular item, and I'd like to see Davenport added to the list in order to partner with this firm to do the RFP. I'll be happy to go into further detail.
I need to ask actually council for any evaluation regarding the legal procedures that we're obligated to follow in firm selection. This sounds uncomfortably, I'm sorry, this was new to me, but it sounds uncomfortably like intervening in an established process specifically for the advantage of a particular firm, and I'm worried that we could get in a great deal of trouble if we do that.
I am concerned as well. I was not aware that that's the direction we were heading in. I would like some additional time to evaluate the request in light of the actual information we have here in your package. Is there any concern about holding?
This is not time critical. As
Not
far
time
as staff
sensitive.
is concerned, it's possibly something we'll need to just revise our work plan, but it's not time critical for staff.
All right, well, if there's no, yes.
Yes,
Mr.
I would like,
Lawson.
I appreciate staff's scoring of the different contractor proposals that came in, and I understand from the first page the 4 or 5 categories that were sort of used, but I would like a sort of a breakdown of how that scoring is actually done. in the sense of numerical assignments and how they're made and what specifically the issues are that are looked at. And I do think that local contractors, however we're going to define that, and I do think we ought to look at the definition of that, should be recognized as of having some merit in that whole mosaic of how we select. Weighting are different, and I don't know whether that's a factor that's considered at all at this point in the point system, and that in the points that are awarded is the fact that they are a local firm have any bearing at all in establishing that.
I know in some, okay.
It does. We're limited, and we'll have to give you more information, but we're limited because this is a state project and state funded. There are limits on how much points they will allow us to assign
Right.
to those categories. We do, when it's a local project, we have a higher percentage, if I remember right, but we'll bring you that memo. But
If I could just see what the categories are and how the points are distributed within those categories, and then in this particular case, how the points were assigned, how subjective that process is, and who's making those decisions. Thank you.
Ms. Adams?
Basically, I was going to ask for the same thing again. I was looking for the documentation of the evaluation process, so I too would like to see that when it comes back around, that we can just look at it.
We want to see inside the matrix.
Yeah.
In the matrix.
We have done that before, and I don't see any reason why we can't do that here. If this is not time sensitive, I would suggest that we displace it to March.
Yeah, that's fine, and also keep in mind the source of the funding too, because that probably has some additional restrictions, but we'll look at all of that, bring
Yeah.
information back in March.
And when we get that report back, if we can be presented with the specific restrictions that come with the funding source. I know that we are frequently specifically limited in how much weight we can put on the local basis of the.
I think the positive thing is that this is a 20/80 match, I guess, isn't it? Which says that we're getting a lot of money to help us do this, and I applaud the staff for getting that money to the city.
Okay. Mr. Taylor?
This is federal funding, Mr. Garrity. One of the criteria, excuse me, Mr. Turner, one of the criteria is not pricing, correct? We don't go with the lowest responsible bid. Can you tell me about that process?
Certainly. For professional services under the Brooks Act, which is federal law, and under the Mini Brooks Act, which is state law, the city selects consultants for professional services based upon qualification. Unlike the bidding practices that we often talk about when we're talking about contracts for construction, the professional services, your intent is to obtain the best qualified consultant, not the lowest price consultant, to assure that you don't get a cut rate design and cut rate construction project. So the process is different than if it was all city money also, as Mr. Garrity indicated. We have a much higher percentage for MWBE participation as a scoring category, and for local or distance from the work site as a grading criteria. But with the federal funding that comes through the state, then we are restricted and we have to use their rules if we're going to accept their money.
Well, I don't want to necessarily focus on women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses, but we focus on majority and everybody else, all three. There is just no way that a woman-owned business or a minority-owned firm can win a contract like this if the city doesn't prioritize capacity building. So again, the bid, the order that they came in has nothing to do with the lowest responsible bid, and I think we owe it to our local businesses to make sure the next time he or she might be in line to receive a contract on the local level. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So we'll displace this item to March, and we'll get the information regarding what how specifically the breakdown goes in the existing formula, what limitations we have on our ability to add extra emphasis on various factors, and then we'll need to make a decision based on whether we hold the work and go through a reset of our process or not.
The last thing I want to say, I tried to have this conversation before it came to the committee so that we could sort of vet it before it came to us. That didn't happen. We did have a conversation with staff, but we were not able to come to a resolution, so I do apologize that we're at this junction,
All right.
but it needs to be addressed.
Thank you.
I'll just
Yeah,
make this
Mr.
one
Montgomery.
comment that, although I agree with Councilmember Taylor in references on the item, and I know we want to get work done, we want to see things happen, but if we can do something that benefits those enterprises in our community, I think it's incumbent upon us to work towards that, regardless of sometimes the delay it may incur. We've done that on some of other projects that we wanted to make sure that we had certain MWBE goals on it. We decided that we would incur a delay in that project in order to make sure that certain metrics were met in that process. So I don't think that it is something that is unprecedented if we come to that conclusion to make that type of decision, but I think it is something worthwhile to review, look at, and assess, and then make a decision at that time.
Very good, thank you. So that's back on March. We'll move now to the general agenda, and we have 4 items. Let's begin with item G1, update on Winston-Salem Transit Authority services. Mr. Turner.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. As you recall, you asked for some usage demographic data for our transit customers, as well as information on changes that staff have made in response to the comments that have been received from customers and from the general public. As you also recall, staff was given the authority to make small changes to the routes, times, stops, etc., that did not have significant impacts on the overall operation of the system or did not have domino effects on other routes. So we have a report at your places. I apologize it wasn't available to get it into your books, but it is at your places. And what we have there at the very beginning, well, the majority of it, is documentation on the demographics of the ridership. So I'll be happy to walk through that if you like, or I can skip straight to the end and talk about the changes that have been made.
Without objection, let's skip to what actually has been done to respond to issues since our last meeting. Mr. Turner.
So we had a number of people who spoke at the council meeting about Skyline Village and the access to that facility, to that neighborhood. And Route 86 was changed to better serve the Skyline Village community. We now are traveling into the development down Williamson Street to Timlick and Bruce Streets in order to get closer to the neighborhood and address the concerns from citizens who were saying that walking up the hill on Williamson with its narrow characteristics, ribbon paved streets, and no sidewalk was a concern, and because of the steepness of the hill. We've also looked at placement of bus stops in order to address concerns that citizens had about confusion with those. The Route 87, which serves the downtown health center and the DSS, has been revised to no longer travel there on Saturdays and Sundays to improve the efficiency, since those facilities are not open on those days. Route 93, which travels to the transportation center on an hourly basis, has been recast so that it also travels to the DSS on the inbound and outbound routes. And finally, Route 103, which is a circulator, was changed to address difficulty it had remaining on schedule. It will continue to serve the Forsyth Medical Center, the mall, Brewway, Westgate Center Boulevard, Westgate Center Plaza, etc.
Questions? Ms. Adams.
Thank you, Chair Bessie. Thank you, Mr. Turner. I can appreciate the update, but again, for me and mine, the North Ward, when the employers of the ward have contacted us, and I think, or I felt like I should have received some type of follow-up before now. I'm not getting it in this update, and I know I see the message where there will be other updates as we do whatever we do, but I think it behooves the staff to at least keep the council member, informed as to what's going on, because you're not the one that's getting beat up at the Harris Teeter, I am, So I just need to know what's going on at this point with Wake Forest, West Rock, United Furniture, and those areas up and down Chatillon and in the university area.
The furniture company that approached us in the other institution that was providing temporary services.
As well as Cook. I've heard from Cook as well.
Yeah. We have set up a meeting to discuss their issues with them, and I'm not sure when it's scheduled, but I know it's scheduled for soon, to meet with their individual who is going to represent their position. I do know that it had to be rescheduled due to a conflict he had with coming in from out of town. We did talk to the school about the issues of relocating the bus routes on Thurman and University and Cherry Streets, and the proposed changes that we were looking at were actually going to be a negative for them, so we held off on making any changes until we can come up with something that we think will be a net positive as opposed to a positive on one side of the equation and negative on the other side of the equation. So we just, instead of just changing who is hurt, we're wanting to see if we can come up with something that will be beneficial for more.
And I understand that, but, and I'm sure you're working on it, but again, Mr. Turner, Mr. Garrity, it's important. You know, when I'm getting calls from Dr. Baker at Kimberly, I'm getting calls from no different than any other part of our community that are strategic locations where people move. As your report said, 80+% of the people that ride the bus, they ride the bus again, like we know, because they have to. And it's not like they're making $60,000, $70,000 a year. And I just need to stay informed, so when I'm getting these calls that I am referring through my CAL to Mr. Barnes and you and others, I just need to be able to say more now than we're working on it, because as a person that's worked in the corporate America, that's not good enough for the customer for you to tell me we're working on it.
Certainly.
At least give me some updates so I can say they're in contact with.
Certainly.
They're looking to meet with X by, you know, if I can get that, then I'll be okay. But I really need to stay informed about where we are in the process.
We'll get you those.
My customers and constituents expect that of me.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? If not, thank you for the update. It's very helpful. And we'll have another update in March, and then we anticipate any more complex system changing move potential to come back in April.
Correct.
Very good. Thank you. Let's go then to item G2, please.
Item G2, resolution approving a rate increase for TransAid services to be used for revenue enhancement to TransAid operations.
Mr. Turner, if you would report on this item, please.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. As the committee may recall, we presented information on the revenue and fund balance outlook for the transit fund in previous month. And that was follow-up to a forecast that we had provided to the committee and to the council in general several months ago. As you may also recall, the outlook was dire in terms of the fund balance in the Mass Transit Tax Fund. And so staff had at that time proposed that the committee consider a increase in the fixed route fee, fixed route fare, and an increase in the TransAid fare. The TransAid fare is currently 50 cents. There's an error in the book, but it's currently 50 cents, and a large percentage of the ridership that rides TransAid is allowed to use a discount so that they actually don't pay anything. The staff also proposed an increase in the fixed route fee from $1 to $1.30. The direction that we received from this committee was that there was not particular interest at this time in a fixed route fee increase. However, staff was free to come back and make a case or make a proposal for adjusting the TransAid fare to a different value. Under federal law, you are allowed, a city is allowed, to have a TransAid fare that is up to 2 times the standard fixed route fare for that city. What we have proposed is that the fare for TransAid be increased to the same amount as the fare for fixed route, and that the discount be eliminated for those who have a Medicaid card, so that everyone under this proposal who rides TransAid would pay the same amount as a fixed route rider. Be happy to answer any questions.
And just for clarity for the discussion, the resolution that is in your packet and is before the committee for possible consideration today simply starts the public participation process for considering a rate increase affecting TransAid. It does not make a final decision on TransAid, but authorizes beginning the public participation process of considering that request. And there would be complete public hearings and comment opportunity, and that information would all be vetted through the WISTA board before being brought back for final consideration by the full council. Questions? Yes, Mr. McGovern.
And that would be what I just wanted to be explained clearly in terms of the process. If we move forward today and council says, let's move forward with the evaluation of this, what does that process look like? What can the public expect in terms of how they can engage in terms of being able to let their concerns, support, or positions be felt on any changes?
If the committee today give us direction, then the Finance Committee of the City Council would also be asked to consider this next month, and that would then kick off the public engagement process that would be initiated by the WISTA board, or by WISTA and its board. And that is a multi-month process which provides many opportunities for the citizens and the passengers to come provide feedback as to their thoughts on any potential rate increase.
Okay. Because I think once that happens, it's just be clear for public to know how they can engage, and particularly the ridership of TransAid to know how that process works. And then more explicitly, I think it's clear, needs to be clear to the public, even as WISTA is the arm out that'll be doing much of that engagement, that it's council's decision and that it is on council's action that these things will take place. You know, for good or bad, I think sometimes WISTA gets hit over the head a little bit harder, and understand it is our decision that we make. They execute and we contract with WISTA, but at the end of the day, decision that's made here is council's decision. So.
And the only other thing I would add is that in the WISTA hearing and comment process, I know that we have from time to time gotten complaints that the meeting room was inadequate, that the timing was not convenient. Let's be clear that the City Hall facilities are at the disposal of WISTA for public comment meetings. Parks and recreation centers are available, and encourage as broad a public comment and review opportunity as the required processes permit, understanding that you're not confined to just meeting at the transportation center. Although, of course, that's a convenient spot for many people. You can also meet other places, and we would encourage that.
Certainly.
Ms. Adams.
I think that's a great idea, Councilmember Bessie, particularly since the huge engagement we've gotten from riders of the WISTA. I think that a thought should be put into that we make sure that we are in those areas, just like the charts are showing us, in the zip code areas where people are coming from, getting on the bus and getting off the bus as well. I'd also like, and maybe I don't know whether this will be part of it and whether we should even bother our customers with it, but I think even for this presentation, it would have been nice to see that chart again that we saw yesterday about the transit fund, because everybody thinks that, again, we got this money that we can just pull down that's sitting over here for transportation. And if my council members Montgomery and Taylor remember, when we came on board in 10 and 11, the transit fund was below where it needed to be to even function. And what that chart is showing us again is we're already there. So everybody needs to keep that in mind. It's, again, we're not doing this because we can. We're doing some changes and some assessments because we have to right now.
And the other thing that I think is relevant as public discussion goes forward is to keep in mind how we compare in terms of our fares to our peer cities of of the 5 peer city systems in the state, we are the only one that charges less for the premium service, the Transaid service, than for the fixed route service. And there is some concern that that is sending an artificial signal that we prefer folks to take the Transaid rather than the fixed route when they have the option of either one. And if the Worcester Board were to recommend and we were to adopt the full possible increase that this resolution authorizes to be sent to public discussion, we would still be the lowest Transaid fare in the state by a substantial margin. Greensboro would be the closest at $1.50, and the other 3 cities go at $2, $2.50, and $3.50 respectively. Further discussion? Yes,
Mr. Chairman, I think the problem that I see with this is the Transaid ridership fare increase is not going to solve our budget problem with the bus deficits that we're seeing forecast on that chart. And I think the council is going to need to think seriously about the fixed ridership if we're going to eventually be able to fund our transportation system. This may not be the year to do it since we have so much agitation and so many other changes being made, but I don't know how long we can sustain a $1 fee for that.
Mr. Montgomery, then Mr. Taylor.
Yep, I think I don't disagree with Councilman Larson's statement in reference to even any changes to Transaid won't fix the managed transit fund, nor a change in the rate to the fixed routes will fix the issue with mass transit fund in terms of the revenue that's generated by it. At the end of the day, it comes into this council is going to have to make a decision in terms of how we fund out of our general fund dollars mass transit fund. And again, very clearly, it goes along the same lines of where we charge. We underfund transportation in this city by far in terms of where we compare to other communities. And I think that is the larger conversation, not just fare increase, but as a city, how do we actually fund transportation? And I think we have to think of it much more from an economic development standpoint in terms of this is a people mover, not just for people to go to the mall and to go to the grocery store, but this is what people use to get to work. Right. It is an economic driver, and that's how we're going to have to look at it in terms of how we the absence of that means that enterprise would not be able to run and function properly without a public transportation system running at its optimal caliber. And I think that's the challenge that we have that we're going to have to figure out from a financial standpoint, which is going to be a cost trade-off in terms of where we look at it, the revenue that we have. How do we generate the proper revenue to be able to pay for the service that is clearly needed in the community?
Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've got a tough job to figure out how we best manage our resources. I do agree that a change in the Transaid rate only hurts our most vulnerable citizens. I don't know that it's going to make that much of a difference in our budget forecast. I am probably in the minority. Let me first say, Mr. Barnes, all the transit staff, we appreciate the work that you do. I think you provide a quality service for the people in our community. I am challenged at this time with making any decision that moves forward conversations with raising rates on fixed routes or Transaid routes until we're able to sort of come to a compromise or resolution on the fixed route system. I know there are a lot of people who have concerns about it, and there are a lot of people who feel like we might be paying more for less. So I hope that I'm in the minority. It just in good conscience, I am not able to move forward until we make those adjustments to the fixed routes. I know they're on the way. They are not yet completed, but the perception is that we're touching on the most vulnerable citizen, and in good conscience, I can't do that. So I won't be supporting this resolution. I do agree that we need to do something, but I think taking a comprehensive look at the transportation budget might be what we need to do.
I think that's actually in progress and underway. Mr. Montgomery.
Well, I do understand Councilman Taylor's statements. As I mentioned last month, that was more the reason why I was more hesitant in reference to the fixed routes. When it comes to Transaid and the actions that were taken, Transaid, nothing happened in terms of that accident. That system runs as it did prior to any changes with that. And with that being said, if there's a motion in order Mr. Chair, I'd like to move in that order that we move forward.
All right, the motion's been made that we direct staff to begin the public participation process to consider possible fare increase for TransAid. Is there a second? Second. Further discussion?
That wasn't from a member.
Actually, I think, yes. he's-
Oh, okay.
over
Oh, where are you
Supposed to
going?
be
What are
over
you
there.
doing, John?
I just wanted to be close to you.
I
Geographically
told
challenged.
him, I said, you supposed to be.
Okay,
trying-
I
I'm trying
said,
to get
you
close.
messing me up. So you,
I was gonna say, it says he's vice chair.
all right. I said, I'm in the wrong chair. I'm
All right,
sorry.
That's okay. That's a change
Get the
since
majority.
last year, so
Okay.
Keeping everybody on their toes.
All right. I'm sorry.
that's all right. Further discussion? If not, those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
And the motion is approved 3-1, with Councilmember Taylor voting no. Let's move on then to item G3, please.
Item G3, utility services update.
Thank you. And for this report, we will hear from our utilities director, Ms. Driver.
If I can get the computer, it's going to sleep, so let me see if I can wake it up. No.
We were at a meeting this morning, I had to work a computer for
I've already apologized to Councilmember McIntosh. This is the
No.
second time he's heard it, and so it won't be near as exciting the second time around as the first. Does anybody know how to get this thing woke up? You would think I'd be able to work a computer if I...
I know it's different from a water sewer pipe.
I know. Restart it.
Yep.
Microsoft Salute.
Here they come.
Control, delete.
Okay, yeah.
There it comes.
The fix off.
Yeah.
Hey, what's wrong with CIO?
Bring in the text.
Yeah, actually, the suggestions are made that we move to item G4. Is that going to involve presentation via the technology?
We're gonna talk about that.
Okay, then let's go to G4, please.
Item G4, small cell tower technology update.
All right, Mr. Turner.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, small cells are a new technology or a new generation of technology to provide cellular data service to customers. Traditional cell towers, as you may recall, are 150, 200, even 300 feet tall. These devices are intended to be inconspicuously, although visible, placed in the right-of-way, and typical sizes are antennas on the order of 10 to 15 feet, let's say, as a maximum, and instead of large transmission tower transmitters, electronic devices, they would have shoebox-sized transmitters that would be placed, again, in the right-of-way. The intent for these types of devices are that they would be on utility poles, on existing structures, perhaps on their own poles, but that they would blend into the surrounding community and look like devices that you otherwise would be seeing today, or look similar to those. Other cities in North Carolina have been putting these devices in, or have been allowing these devices to be put in by their cellular service providers. Winston has not, the city of Winston-Salem has not yet received a petition, but we have received several overtures asking questions, and in some cases preliminary requests for these. The North Carolina Department of Transportation has also been approving these devices. So they're in the city already, just on state roads. They're in our sister cities, and therefore we're anticipating that the request to the city for these types to be put on city streets is imminent. The devices are typically permitted via an encroachment agreement, similar to what you, the council, approve in a lot of cases, or similar to what you've delegated to staff to do in a few cases. And let me explain. You delegated to staff the authority to approve encroachment for devices that will not create a safety hazard or pedestrian and vehicle impediment, if those devices are in the right of way, on city streets, obviously. However, there's no explicit authority for these types of devices. That authority was delegated with the intent of helping the development community with new construction and speeding up their process for review and approval. The federal law and state law have a provision that calls for a shot clock to be triggered once a request is received by a city for approval of these types of devices. If that city does not act within the time period of the shot clock, the buzzer goes off and the project is approved automatically. We have proposed that, or we are proposing, that council give staff the delegated authority to approve these types of devices in order to make sure that we don't trigger the shot clock and can respond in an appropriate amount of time for the devices that, again, are already being installed in the city on state roads, but are not currently on city streets. The benefit for our citizens is better coverage for their residential neighborhoods, which are typically off of city streets, compared to or comparable to what they would have on major arterials as commuters. There is a model ordinance that's being transferred around or shared around between the major cities in North Carolina. I attended a workshop with folks from the city's IS department 3 weeks ago, where we talked with the other cities, and everyone that we've talked to is supportive of doing this type of thing at the staff level. We also understand from their staff that their elected boards are comfortable with approving these types of devices as long as, again, they are in that category of small cell. If you're comfortable with it, what we propose is to bring back a variation on the model ordinance for your consideration in March. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
Where's the money in all of this? We get no royalties, we get no rental fees, we get nothing, do we?
That's correct.
It's just like a telephone pole or just like any other public utility that's put in place.
Right.
We make the space available free of charge to a private company.
Yes.
Right, it's private service. All right. I would ask that this not be allowed in the historic district of Winston-Salem. It's a matter of course. I just don't see these things being installed in the historic district.
And that's a good point. We certainly can look at that. We don't allow certain other things in Old Salem. One of the other mechanisms that the industry has used is to place these inside structures where they can't be seen but can still provide that signal level. So that's something that a individual property owner in that case would be asked to
Could
consider.
rent the space.
That'd be up to them.
They could rent the money. They could make
Well,
money off it.
But that would not involve the city granting an encroachment.
Okay. Mr. Montgomery, Ms. Adams, and Mr. McIntosh. Mr. Montgomery.
It's a question of trying to get clarity. So will the council wouldn't have to make a decision on these items?
If delegated down to staff, that's correct.
Okay. And so what you're asking for in terms of the criteria, in terms of how, if we delegate that to staff, in terms of what is the criteria that we would want staff to make that decision on basis?
Yeah, correct. We propose something to you next month if you're comfortable with this concept and see if that proposal was acceptable. And again, it would be in the framework of devices that are on the scale that I described.
Yeah, because there's no way I don't think we can go through the current process and use that time.
Right. Ms. Adams.
I was just going to ask for next time, or can you send to us pictures of the devices in other cities, maybe North Carolina or whatever, if we have any presently?
Sure.
Okay.
Now, we do have some on streets within the city, as I understand it.
Right.
They're state designated routes, so it's state criminal right.
Haynesmall Boulevard is where I saw one.
Okay.
Probably didn't notice it because it looked like a small transformer hanging on the side of it.
Okay.
Mr. McIntosh.
Is the mystery pole that was down in front of Marshall Plaza, is that one of these?
It was a future one.
Was a future one. Okay.
I see no conflict there.
Right. I want to avoid that situation again. So whatever the guidelines are, I don't think we want to be too prescriptive, but we got to have a level of sensitivity of where they go. And I would recommend in the downtown area that they not be in front of a residence, right outside a residence window, things like that. I do think this is when we did the cell tower ordinance that we spent a tremendous amount of time on, there was talk about this kind of technology coming along, which I know I was excited about because I felt like it would take us out of the heat of battle that we get in when we have large towers, and I think this is a much better solution as long as I'm assuming the technology works as well as they say it does, but it does take us out of the loop on some of those more contentious neighborhood issues. So I look forward to doing this, but just as Old Salem, needs a different set of guidelines, I think downtown we need a different set of guidelines.
Mr. Salem.
Mr. Turner, I think we agree that everybody knows that this type of technology is necessary, but we might be faced with sort of the NIMBY concept that nobody wants it in their backyard. If this authority is delegated to the staff level, what happens in the event that a community, a particular location, doesn't want these in their front or their backyard?
Well, if we receive that feedback in advance, then obviously we would take that into consideration. And one of the things we always do when we look at staff delegated authority is if there is resistance to the proposal from the community, we either turn that request down or we will remand it up to council for you to make a decision if it's a situation where part of the community may want it and another part of the community may not. So we don't, at the staff level, make those kind of calls when there's a argument between two facets of the community. We let it go back to the council that has the ultimate decision. Because in reality, if we approved it and the community objected, our decision can be approved to the council anyway.
I was wondering about that. I think we have a very capable and qualified staff. I'm sort of concerned about what happens in the event of opposition, and we represent these communities. We sign up to speak for them, and I'd hate for something to happen where there is controversy. You never get around it, but it's our job to take it on, and not yours in certain cases.
Certainly a criteria that you might consider is treat them differently when they're proposing a new pole.
Yeah, exactly.
As opposed to using an existing
Yes.
utility pole or something that's hidden inside an existing structure.
I should mention, since you bring that up, that it's possible that there are some that will be approved without they will be installed without our approval because they're going on existing poles that already have permission to be there. And so there may be some like that where it won't be the city's decision, even on a city street, because a previously approved encroachment allows for that installation. There may be situations like that, just to be aware of.
Right, thank you. Mr. Brown.
Is there any thought process around allowing us to co-locate, say, cameras on any of these poles? So we can get away from the current stalemate with new power?
Yeah, one of the communities, I forget which of the major cities it was putting that in as a condition. They had it as a condition on each pole, which I thought was a bit overreaching in terms of whether they really were going to be able to take advantage of that. Right. But certainly it's an option if we see one that comes in and we have a plan already in place to do something there.
It'd be nice to have an agreement up front so we don't have to go negotiate those every time, but some
Right.
percentage, because I think you're right. I think we're not going to put them on every pole, but some percentage of them we want to do.
Certainly something we can look at. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Any other input? Well, please take those suggestions and incorporate those in a draft. Will do. Thank you very much. Let's move back then to item G3, please. Speaking of technology, it's now working.
Yeah, it is now working, so we're ready. So, good evening, Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for having me. I'm going to give you a brief overall update for utilities and kind of a high-level one, but feel free to ask questions when I go through. Just a reminder of who we are. We provide water treatment. We provide water distribution, so we get it out to the houses and the residents, and then after it's used, we take it back through the wastewater collection and then back through the wastewater treatment process. And also under the utilities umbrella is the solid waste disposal services. We have a slogan, "We're working for you." I don't know if any of you remember some commercials that we had a few years ago. That was kind of our tagline, and that's how we want the customers to see us, is we are working for them. Winston-Salem Forsyth County Utility Commission is a joint city and county agency, so it's a little different than other departments. It was formed when the city and the county merged their systems in 1976. It has a utility commission, a board that sets rates and policies for the commission, and the board has 11 members. 5 are appointed by the city council, and 5 are appointed from the county commissioners, and then the mayor and the chairman of the county commissioners jointly appoint the chairman of the utility commission. It is an enterprise fund, so it is not funded by taxes. It is funded by the water and sewer and solid waste tipping fees that we receive. In FY16, our budget was almost $95 million. That includes operating and debt service. That is for water, sewer, and solid waste. So that includes all three components. Our vision statement is that we will be a top-performing utility supported by trained, knowledgeable, and proactive staff, dependable equipment, efficient processes, effective information management, and fair and affordable rates. Everything that we do should meet this goal in this vision. Water and sewer rates, just to give you a comparison of how we line up with our peers in North Carolina, you see the other top utilities, Raleigh, Durham, Charlotte, and Greensboro, and Winston-Salem. Us and Greensboro are down near the lowest as far as our rates go. We're at roughly $83 on a bi-monthly cycle for 1,200 cubic feet for our customers. And I like to show this to folks is when you look at how much you pay for water and sewer service, you're at 3 cents per gallon. And if you compare that to other things that you buy in quantities of a gallon, you know, you're at $3.60 for milk, and your gas is fairly low right now, I guess. So it's, you know, $2.15 is average price right now for a gas a gallon. So water is an essential service, and the price that you pay per gallon, I think, is pretty important. And just a reminder of how important, I guess, water services is you can ask the folks in Chapel Hill after they experienced their water issues 2 weeks ago or 2 weekends ago. So I would say that it's a pretty important service that we provide. Water treatment overview. Our source waters are the Yadkin River and Salem Lake. Just a reminder that we control the top 30 feet in the Kerscott Reservoir. So city officials back in the 1950s had the foresight to fund that reservoir when it was built, and so we have rights to that storage. If we ever were to have an issue here downstream and we needed water, we could ask for a release. Our agreement is with the Army Corps of Engineers, so we could ask for them to release that. We hadn't had to do that, but we have that available to us if it becomes necessary. We serve approximately 327,000 people. In FY16, we averaged approximately 36.5 million gallons a day, which is about 41% of our current capacity, our water capacity. And then also for the total years, we pumped out of the treatment plant 13.3 billion gallons of water. And then the operating budget for water treatment is around $9.4 million. Here's a map of our service system. You can see for Forsyth County, we have 3 different water treatment plants, as I mentioned, one in Clemens, one on the northwest side of the county, and then one off MLK Boulevard, the Thomas Water Treatment Plant. We have 14 storage tanks and then 7 pumping stations. That's how the system operates. Just an aerial overview of our 3 plants. Swan has a capacity of 25 million gallons a day. Nelson is our largest plant at 48 million gallons a day. And then Thomas is our newest plant. It was our oldest plant, but we decommissioned it in 2008 and rebuilt it. And it has a capacity of 18 million gallons a day. So the water treatment process, I know some of you have seen this before, but basically we take the water from the source, which is the Yadkin River or Salem Lake, and we have pumps that bring it up to the treatment plant. We add lime and alum to the water for a chemical addition and to adjust pH. And then it goes through a coagulation and flocculation process, and this basically makes the particles bigger so that when it goes into sedimentation, those particles settle to the bottom, and then you got your clear water up on top that flows through the filtration process. And then ultimately we dose it with chlorine to kill any bacteria. We have on-site storage tanks that gives the chlorine contact time before we send it out in the distribution system. And then one important note is that I know with the Flint, Michigan issue that was, came up a year or so ago, we do add zinc orthophosphate to our water, which is a corrosion prohibitor which eliminates it protects the pipe from lead leaching. The lead and copper rule that was established in 1992, we do have sampling requirements. We are currently on a reduced monitoring for lead and copper. When we started in 1992, we were required to do 100 samples every year, but when you show consistently good samples, they will reduce it. So right now we're 50 samples every 3 years. This past summer in 2016 was a sample period for us, so we sampled between June and September because those are the warmer months of the year, and that's when it would be more active, and you'd pick up on something if it was there. The 90 percentile is what we have to report, and those samples were less than 3 parts per billion for lead and 50 parts per billion for copper. Those are the reporting levels. None of the samples, even 100% of the samples tested above those reporting levels, and the action levels, as you'll see in that bottom bullet, are 15 parts per billion for lead and 1,300 parts per billion for copper. So we're well below the action levels for samples. This is just a map of where those samples are taken. Each one of those squares, I guess, has a series of different locations within that block. So there's, like, number 1 has probably 4 or 5 residences there and so forth.
One moment,
Yeah.
Ms. Montgomery has a question.
And it's twofold, and it's one on the lead and copper conversation. No, you've heard a lot about the lead piece of it, but do you have anything in terms of what the impact of copper in the water is and what that means in any sense?
Yeah, so it's lead and copper. They're both that can cause harmful effects. I know that when we have to stay below those limits for, that I mentioned, the 15 for lead and 1,300 for copper. So we're monitoring for both of those. Does that answer your question?
Well, I was just saying that maybe it's something, maybe if it's not in this report, just understand that we've gotten stuff around impacts of lead. And what
Right,
that
in
means,
children.
but what does copper, even
Do,
though we're below
right.
that, just from an understanding of what that means.
Sure.
And then on the other side for the sampling area.
Yep.
Just a question in reference to the sampling areas and understanding
Right.
where they are within
Mhm.
geographic area, how those areas are selected, and then in addition to that, and I'm not sure exactly where those places are specifically, but I can just from looking at the map, and I think about some of the older homes, older pipes, older places within the city that would have your lead and copper pipes, I would venture to say are not necessarily in the outer portions of that, but more so centrally located. And so how does that affect in testing?
So we test Tier 1 sites, and Tier 1 is actually not the oldest homes. The homes that are more likely to have lead and lead solder pipes or lead pipes are actually those built after 1980. So we target those homes, and so that all these sample locations fall within that Tier 1 criteria.
Ms. Adams.
But to Councilmember Montgomery's comment, with what is going on with Flint and other urban cities, those places are usually where African Americans, Latino, Hispanics, poor people, poverty, inner city. I know that perception or whatever would say, well, we wouldn't find lead in the inner city, but we would have to be responsible to answer to that if an issue did occur. Mm-hmm. So I, too, would like to know, how did we decide, and how do we get sampling just so that we don't have an issue, whereas we have to respond to say, well, the houses in the 80s were the ones that we thought. That won't wash with us. So I'd like to understand that too, Chair Beth.
Well, and so that is an excellent point, and we can relook at our sampling sites.
I think we need to do that.
But anything that we sample has to go through the state to they have to approve our new locations, but we certainly can entertain that.
Excuse me. Ms. Montgomery and Mr. McIntyre.
Is there, even, I know we have our normal process of sampling and sending things in, but is there a way that we can just have our local testing of things that we
absolutely.
do just that we're, aware of things, whether it's not,
Absolutely.
changing up our total process, but we're just saying, hey, well, we do our assessing outside of the normal piece just to make sure that we're still keeping up with what's
Correct.
happening, what's going on. I know, again, my house I live in, it's all copper pipes in that house, built in the 50s. Less of lead, but copper, I
Right.
don't know anything about what that means to the person. I doubt that I have that issue. But people who have those, if you think about lead and copper, they don't know,
That's right.
and
Right.
if I looked at that map and said, well, they didn't test, anything
Right.
close to it. So, and not to say that there's an issue, but
Right.
just for people to feel comfortable.
Yeah.
So anyone absolutely can call and ask for us to test, and we'll come out there. We have to have permission from the property owners because it is regulated at the customer's taps. We have to go into the home, and there's a process. So, but absolutely anybody, and anybody that we did, if a customer decides to call and wants us to sample outside of those sample areas, we test it, and then it has to be included in our reporting back to the state. So, but yes, absolutely, we can do that.
So the issues of lead and copper, well, the issues of lead in our community tend to come from the soldering that's used to join the copper pipes together, and that was a method of doing that occurred in the 80s.
Right.
The inner city neighborhoods and the older neighborhoods, West End and West Salem and most of their older neighborhoods, turn of the century to the 20s, have a lot of galvanized pipe. What kind of problems does that cause? Sort of leaching issues that you have from those?
None that we know of. I mean, no, not aware of anything.
I know it's a mark against you on a home inspection. It could be build up fragility. Okay, thanks.
And when the rule was implemented back in the 90s, we went through and tried to replace all the lead services that we knew of, and we replace them. If we find any that are left, of course, we'll replace them.
Why
Going up to the
don't we
meter.
ask for a report back on the sampling station location question?
Yeah, sure.
Is April,
Oh, yeah, I mean, now we can't get those changes, I'm sure, from the state, like approval for those yet, but I can definitely look into it by then.
well,
Yeah.
yeah, why don't you come back to us at that point with a proposal for
Sure.
a plan? Thank you.
Okay,
And if there's nothing else on that point, let's go
go.
forward.
Okay. So we do sample other water quality parameters. We're collecting those at both the plants and in the distribution system. We are required to collect samples at the plant every 2 weeks. We collect 180 samples each month within the distribution system, and those samples we test for coliform, bacteria, chlorine, residual, and temperature, and then 25 of those 180 are tested every 6 months for pH, alkalinity, and orthophosphate. Those are part of the lead copper rule. And so here's a kind of a sample location of those samples that are taken monthly. And as you can see, it's pretty spread out throughout the system. So our field, moving on to field operations, this is a 174-member staff that encompasses the front line of the utility. It is our largest component of utility. We have roughly 380 employees in the department and 174 here. They provide your water. They are out there in the field fixing the water leaks. They're reading meters. They're fixing our sewer leaks that we have, any kind of construction services, and they also handle the technical service, which is our GIS group. So these folks are busy. The operating budget for that is $15.4 million. Just some stats. We maintain 2,276 miles of water main, 1,750 miles of sewer main. We have 126,638 water meters. Last year, our crews repaired 441 main breaks, and we had a little over 1,000 new connections added to the system. We had 68 permits for new water and sewer extensions to the system, and we responded to 184,000 customer service calls. So again, I'm telling you, those folks are busy. We appreciate what they do. Wastewater treatment, we have 2 treatment plants that have a combined treatment capacity of 51 million gallons a day. We discharge the treated water back into the Salem Creek and Yakin River. We averaged approximately 32.8 million gallons a day, which is about 64% of our current capacity on the wastewater side. And so overall, we pumped 12 billion gallons of wastewater in FY16, and the approximate operating budget for that is $13 million. Two pictures of aerials of the Muddy Creek plant, which is a 21 million gallon a day plant, and Archie Elledge, which is 30 million gallons a day. Our wastewater treatment efficiency, the tons that we received of regulated pollutants that we received at the plant was 26,109 tons. We are regulated and only allowed to discharge back by state regulations 2,855 tons, but we actually discharged 762 tons. So we're doing a good job, and of course we have 0 violations to the permit last year, so that's good. This is an overview of the county of our water and wastewater service area. So the blue line shows where our water boundaries go, and then the green line shows where our sewer boundaries go. And if you can see, we do stretch out in some portions outside the county, and we also do provide wastewater treatment and water to Yakin County, Davie County, Greensboro. So we are like a regional provider for this area. Yeah.
So back to that one, the sewer basin lines are sort of a defining point for future development. That gets much more expensive because we have to pump water up over those bridges down into the basin.
That is correct.
Okay.
And Paul Norby just gave a presentation to the Utility Commission on Monday with that very topic in mind. So they look at that when they're developing their legacy plan. So switching to solid waste program, we have 2 landfill sites. One is a municipal solid waste. It is at Haynes Mill Road. It's the largest municipally owned and operated landfill in North Carolina. The rate is $36 a ton there, or you can pay a flat rate for pickups and trailers, which is $12. The current capacity, I just found out today because we received a lot of trash last year, has dropped to 2035. So that fluctuates depending on how we do year by year. But we all know how permitting a new landfill, what measures you have to do to permit a new landfill. So that is something that's not too far away. We have a construction and demolition debris landfill on Old Salisbury Road. That's $33 a ton rate, and the flat rate is $12 there as well. So just some statistics. In FY16, we managed more than 316,000 tons of municipal solid waste, construction and demolition debris, and yard waste. And you can see the breakdown at the different facilities. We served an average of 468 vehicles a day. That's pretty impressive. And a total of 138,741 total trips to the 4 facilities. The approximate operating budget for solid waste is $7 million. Just some waste reduction activities. We help manage the drop-off sites and school recycling. Forsyth County pays us $140,000, roughly $141,000 for the county drop-off sites, and $66,000 for school recycling. We pay for 3RC, which is the household hazardous waste, of $427,000. That is funded by water and sewer rates and the stormwater fund. We have electronics recycling at a cost of $136,000. We get $35,000 from the state, and the balance is paid by the solid waste fund. And then we have scrap tire recycling, 5,000, almost 6,000 tons at a cost of $455,000. That cost is covered by the state tax distribution, and then of course appliance and scrap metal recycling, 330 tons. Capital improvements. I won't go into the long list of all the capital improvements that we have, but I did want to mention 2 big ones that are on our radar. We're getting ready to embark on a pretty big initiative for automated meter reading. It's going to be a new way of reading our meters. We have the Utility Commission support, and what we want to do is go out and have a fixed network where we can get hourly reads, and that comes through a system right back to our office. It provides huge benefits to the customer. We can notify leaks before they get their bills 2 months later, and it gives us all kind of data to be more efficient in our managing the system. And then last is the collection system improvement program. We're spending a lot of funds. We got a letter from the EPA about 2 years ago. They asked for an audit of our system. We gave them a response. They said, okay, you're doing good, but we'd like to see improvement. We're going to give you 2 years before we come back and audit you again. And they really want us to reduce sanitary sewer overflows. And so we've got a pretty big initiative to try to reduce those. And I think that's it. Yeah.
But just back to the other with the updated with the system itself in terms of the meter reading component.
Oh, yeah.
What about the user end on our side from like water bill paying that kind of stuff? Will that change as well?
Yeah, I mean, everything is going to be enhanced, making bill paying easier, making it where you can get on your smartphone and look at your usage. You know, you can monitor it so you can see if you have a leak. I mean, but so yes.
Because we have a 1999 water pay system, I think. At least
Right.
It does what it needs to do, but when you look at it, it's just
Right.
it's not it's a bit outdated. So.
Yes, that will be a component of that. Yes.
I use 99 just as a number out there.
You were born then?
19.
Possibly.
Okay, and we're wrapping.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, any final questions?
I have one question.
Yes.
How much water are we providing Greensboro?
So we don't sell to them all the time. I think they do a flush because they use chloramines in their system, and so that requires them to flush their system, I think, annually. So around April, they'll call us and tell us that they're going to turn on the valve, and we will send them water.
Send them water then, on just a one-time basis per year.
But we have agreements with other locales where they get it more consistently.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Robertson. That is all showing on the agenda. Mr. Turner, is there anything else to come before the committee?
No.
All right, then happy Valentine's Day all, and we are adjourned.
Adjournment, yeah.